afternoon and welcome to another edition of Fashionista. It's that time of Saturday where we get to talk fashion and all things fashion related. And of course, today you will be with me, your girl and your host, Casey Chinere, aka the Fashion Professor. And be with me today as we talk more on fashion. Before we begin the program, let me give you a song coming from Bucci titled Waffle. And after that, we're going to talk more and I'm going to give you what I installed for you on this program.
Story Club FM, the culture is art.
Generally, pikiti yukusaka mane pamene ningofuna kanga kamumbale wangongole na ye yakufuna zake dekusana tetamangire tundipezeke na kake mapampa gatala wochepa kuti ate ndekuti pepe mama na yakufuna zake tough game hii mama irirafu muze ni refu wisiro ayiriziretu half time tough ada tinge mani siri sef muze ni refu injari dipeze go befu kwa tu si danse tima chokila ba wafo bonfe wa wafo nane ni mafuna soft in life dilipile ni kapese pa wafo bonfe wa wafo softy wafo nane sa mafuna soft in life dilipile ni kapese pa wafo.
Story Club FM, the culture is art.
Koma ama kona muntima mulingawa demati ichoka kutia renti kufepi ya kufuna experience titamanga ya tumuguti baka benti wapanirira songonsema opportunity demati ya pandeti tani pena ya funa Braziliani atitiki toki mapepa ndi iPhone nanga nane sobela shit nchane fashioni tough gemo hii mama irira muhuze ni refu wisiro ayiriziretu half time tough ada tingi mani siri sefu muhuze ni refu injare ipeze go refu tima chokila ba wafo bonfe wa wafo nane ni mafuna soft in life libele ninga peze ba wafo bonfe wa wafo softy wafo that is I'm mafuna soft in life libele ninga peze ba wafo nane ni mafuna soft in life libele ninga peze ba wafo that is I'm mafuna soft in life libele ninga peze ba wafo.
Well, this one board coach up on a champion and come down and talk about self-life, you know. When we operate, we want the real thing, we don't want the bell thing. See it, you know. Roll like a boss, pull like a boss, but I pose like a boss full time. See it, you know. When we operate, more investment, more money, blessing from blessing. See it, you know. Push it to the world. Champion success, we don't want to fail. Money from money, pocket, I be load up. Full of the pocket, full of mama boys, more mutton, more bacon.
Story Club FM, the culture is art.
This is Story Club FM.
That is a beautiful track right there coming from Bucci titled Waffle, starting this program on Fashionista. So let's go deep into today's topic and what I have installed for you. Today we're talking about a more serious topic that is fashion history, and we're looking back at the history of textiles. You know, civilizations have happened and we have modern day textiles. But what is the history? Where do they come from? how were they made, and who were the people who were making them. So I am going to go more into textiles across borders and time periods, not specific for a place, but of course they're going to be specific places because that is where the preamble, the genesis of fabrics was. So in history, we see that textiles began approximately 3,400 BC and was common in many parts of the world and was a common commodity among ancient Egyptians. Egyptians used flax harvested on banks of the Nile to create linen, the earliest textile. That is also something for you to know. One thing you should learn from today's edition, that linen was the earliest textile. I'm not saying it's the first, but it was the earliest textile to be made. Wall paintings in the pyramids tell the story of the labor and intense work of harvesting flax, creating thread, and weaving fibers on a loom. A loom was a device that they used to make fabrics. So we're going to talk more on that as we go on. Egyptians used linen for everything from elaborate royal garb and loin clothes for peasants to the sails they used on their ships. Linen was a fabric not only for living but also for the dead. So there you have it. They were not only making clothes for the living but also for the dead. You know, the strips of clothes used in embalming and all those things they used when they were embalming and mummifying their people and their dead people. That was what they used, these clothes that they hand made, from their day-to-day life into the afterlife. The earliest textile touched every life and every class in the Egypt society. So I can say that the earliest production of textiles was in Egypt. Did I say the first? No, I didn't say the first. We say the earliest production of textiles was in Egypt. So we're going to go more into textiles in China and the sleek and folklore. And we see that Egyptians were harvesting flax from 2600 BC, and then silk and span and women were produced from China from women. And according to the Chinese folklore, the Empress Ling Shi discovered silk as a possible textile. So there you have it. Empress Ling Shi was the one who discovered silk as a possible textile. There's a lot of things we're going to grab from today's edition as we are just learning the preamble and the beginning, the genesis of all these clothes and textiles where, everybody's talking about linen, everybody's talking about satin, everybody's talking about silk. Oh, I want to wear a silk dress, but do you know who discovered it? That is what we're finding out today on Fashionista. So as a cocoon and unraveled things that were happening in Egypt, the Empress watched it reveal as she was wearing glimmering fibers and fibers that were spinning into silk. So this woman was classy. That's what I'm getting from here. This woman was classy. And though silk began as a textile and reserved for emperors and empresses, it gradually became available to the lower classes with, the emergency of the Silk Road. And this was due to the availability from Europe. The Europeans made this possible. So the Middle Ages, we're going to talk about silk in the Middle Ages. While the gorgeous silks and taffeted clothes from the members of the royal court were being worn, a more utilitarian fiber was most commonly produced in the textile industry in the medieval era, emphasizing on the medieval era. The lower classes used sheep's wool to create a warm and durable cloth. So we see that the lower classes, since they couldn't afford to get linen or silk, they were using warmer and durable clothing to make these clothes for themselves. And we see that for the first time in history, textiles, natural dyes were often used to color these utilitarian outfits. So back then, I think the peasants were wearing clothes that were really of much color. But in these medieval ages, we see that there was a diversity in the way things were being made. So we also see that leather and fur were used for their warmth and durability. So there you have it, guys. In the medieval ages, that's where we see the introduction of a lot of things. Maybe they might have been introduced earlier on, but this is where we see that fashion was open to a broader spectrum in the textiles industry. So just now we're gonna go on a short music break, and after that I'm gonna come back with more on fashion history.
This is Story Club FM.
Any money I get, I flex. This life I no go waste. No time to vex. Nango muzi wale lase. I won't even pagasha say. Come on so nice. Come on manjo. You go killing me slow. Come on, don't talk about me. This is any choncho. Come on manjo. You go killing me slow. Come on, don't talk about me. This is any choncho. Nika beza kanga tepe ni sangalale. 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 Ah, sure.
This is Story Club FM.
I just wanna party. Tell me something, like you from Soweto, you were. The way you dancing like some Soweto girl. I want your number, should call you on myself. Want your number, come on manjo. You go killing me slow. Come on, don't talk about me. This is any choncho, come on manjo. You go killing me slow. Come on, don't talk about me. This is any choncho. Nika beza kanga chepe ni sangalale. Nika beza kanga chepe ni sangalale. Nika beza kanga chepe ni sangalale. Nika beza kanga chepe ni sangalale.
This is Story Club FM. This is Story Club FM.
I dey straightforward. I like truth and I dey rock rumors. I don't know what you want to do, but make you let me know if you go show up well. Yeah, because I don't buy this, so I don't buy Shayo for Yado. I don't call Gaga, I don't call my guys around. I don't call my mama, I tell them say you bambo. I don't call everybody, I call everybody. But I see you for Insta, you say you dey Ibaja. And anytime I holla, you go say you dey my area. I say no wahala, but I don't dey wait you tire. I don't wait you sote, I don't dey lose weight too. I'm gonna disappoint me. Amaka disappoint me. Young cake disappointment. Amaka disappoint me. Young cake confusion. Amaka disappoint me. But you ain't get
Story Club
disappointment.
FM. The culture
I know
is
two-face,
art.
so I dey straightforward too. But you guys tell me how we dey do you. And if I come through, sure, you go one side. And if I drop rubber, sure, you go turn up. Cause I don't buy these, so I don't want them for my house. I don't call Larry, they set up for yard. I don't call my papa, tell him say you fine. I don't call everybody, I call everybody. I see you for Twitter, retweeting your mister. I enter your matter, but you don't want to answer. I said no wahala, since that's how you are now. I don't want you saute, I don't lose weight too. Oh my God, disappoints me, but the end I get confusion. Oh my God, disappoints me, young get disappointment. Oh my God, disappoints me, young get confusion. Oh my God, disappoints me, but the end I get disappointment. Oh I don't dare and I get straightforward. I like truth and I dey rock rumors. Yeah. I don't know what you want to do, but make you let me know if you gon' show up well. Amaka disappoint me, but the end I get confusion. Amaka disappoint me, young get disappointment. Amaka disappoint me, young get confusion. Amaka disappoint me, but the end I get disappointment.
Mixins in the Foster.
Amaka disappoint me. Amaka disappoint me.
Story Club FM. The culture is art.
The show is that of Fashionista right here on Story Club FM, and you're with me, you're always with me, your girl and your host Casey Chinere, and today we're talking about fashion history, and we were talking about how it was produced. We're talking about textiles, to be quite frankly. We're talking about textiles and how they were produced in Egypt, and how silk was discovered in China by Ling Shi, an empress. And we see that silk was also being worn by the royals back then. And then the Middle Ages, the medieval era, silks were, open to more of the lower class because of the demand that the European continent brought from silk. Now we're going to talk about the Industrial Revolution, the mass production of silk and all these textiles in the textile industry. Until the end of the 19th century, textiles were woven or spun by hand. Guys, let's talk about how weaving these things was actually difficult for these people. Imagine all day. Today you just put, a 1 and 1, 2 and 2 in the machine, and then within 30 minutes, the thing is done. You have a long fabric. But these people spend days, nights, and even weeks, sometimes months, to make a mass production of textiles. Guys, we're really lucky because we're in the technological era where we don't have to worry about these things. But the invention of the steam engine brought about the power loom. So I said we're going to talk more about the loom, and the power loom was created with better quality fabric, more efficiently, and it was making more fabric and as time went, these people were being relieved of the stresses of having to weave these fabrics by hand. This innovation not only impacted the development of textiles, but it changed their daily lives, and mostly the lives of the working class. As I said, this textile from the beginning was being woven by hand, and then the device, the loom, was brought into the industry, and then it helped at least quicken up the pace and ease in the lives of many. The introduction of synthetic fabrics is what we're also going to look right about now. The power loom, the device that is were being talked about. If you can go and search the loom on the internet, you're gonna see it was a wooden device that they were spinning, and it would connect the fabric and make it easy for them to make fabrics and textiles, different fabrics and textiles at that. The power loom was just the first of many modern innovations that have and was impacted and had a very great influence in the textile industry. In the 1930s, synthetic fibers were first discovered and introduced into the textile manufacturing industry. So keep in mind that we're going into the 1930s now, like we're out of the BCs, So synthetic fibers were formed through chemical spinning and twisting processes. So chemicals were being used, spinning was being used, and twisting was also being used. Synthetic fibers offer many advantages, and these were of advantages to many people, and these advantages are such as they were more durable and easy to care for, and they were resistant to mold and lower in cost. Yes, I'm just talking about how these fabrics were being made, but the quality of fabrics, let's just think about it. Now we can wash a cloth and it's going to be dry within 5 hours or 2 hours if it's very light, but these people were weaving by hand with cotton strips, and these clothes are those clothes where you would wash today and they're going to be dry the next day. And if you're not careful, if it's rainy season, you know how rainy season is, and the way it works, life functions around the rainy season. You find that you have dried your clothes and see woman and it's bringing out a stench. So just imagine back in these eras how fabrics were, and I can imagine how they were suffering with mold and stench and everything. And you know how they weren't detergents to wash their clothes. They were using water and other natural ingredients to wash their clothes. I just feel like I am glad and blessed to be born in this modern era, this technologically advanced era. Of course, it has its own ups and downs, and it has its own pet peeves. But guys, it's very important to think about these things and to go back in time. So we see that textiles have gone back to 60 years in history and many more. So linen services and the quality of products has improved as of now. So it's very good to be grateful for where we're coming from. This is why I here just give you the history of fabrics, just to let us know where we're coming from, where we're at, and where we are going. And I'm just gonna give you a short music break, and after that we're gonna come back.
This is Story Club FM.
You know you the ginger. If you know how you dey cause you drop, shit, you know go one person. Love the way you dey dance, girl. I am we made you. Why they call love fadi? Mommy, be cool. Let's hop in my Maserati, baby, hop in my Maserati. I said hop in my Maserati. Hop in my Maserati. Girl, I wanna see you go down. Yeah, say me I love the way you bend body. Hop in my Maserati. Baby, hop in my Maserati. And I just wanna see you ride. Somebody needs somebody. My body, your body. I'm gonna check out all of you. Somebody needs somebody. My body, your body. I'm gonna check out all of you. Let me give you butterfly. Say now you they mesmerize me. I'm out to shine to civilize. Anywhere you go, I go follow. When I up the music, make it go low. And I go give you steady on the slow. Baby, don't dull, make a ginger.
Story Club FM.
Your body, I'm out to jump on me. Show my body, shit. Yeah, baby, come on, back. Innocent, nobody. Yeah. I'm gonna make you happy. Make you happy. Up in my Maserati. Baby, up in my Maserati. I say up in my Maserati. Up in my Maserati. Girl, I wanna see you go down. Yeah, say me I love the way you bend body. Up in my Maserati. Baby, up in my Maserati. And I just wanna see you ride. Somebody needs somebody. My body, your body. I'm gonna check out all of you. Somebody needs somebody. My body, your body. I'm gonna check out all of you. Up in my Maserati. Big love in my Maserati. I say up in my Maserati. Up in my Maserati. Girl, I wanna see you go down. Yeah, say me I love the way you bend body. Up in my Maserati. Make love in my Maserati. And I just wanna see you ride.
Story Club FM. The culture is art.
This is Story Club FM.
Mkazi siti menya mwana kazi musa musunzi malemba sali choncho no ngati mwakanika mwenenu mwana kazi yumumuliki mutibweresela chitonzo Chikristu mwachisia kuti mwasanduka fandame mina ngati Rambo mani mwalo wa jango like jango Yesu mwamusia kuti mwasanduka fandame mina ngati Rambo mani mwalo wa jango like jango malemba Bible lichita indicate umukonde konde malemba Bible lichita indicate samuzunze umukonde ngati Solomoni kumuchengetela ngati Solomoni umukonde ngati Solomoni Bible lichita indicate umukonde konde musadi chitese manyasi ngani anu ifika kuma
Story Club FM. The culture is art.
ngani anu ifika kuma area Chikristu mwachisia kuti mwasanduka fandame mina ngati Rambo mani mwalo wa jango like jango Yesu mwamusia kuti mwasanduka fandame mina ngati Rambo mani mwalo wa jango like jango malemba Bible lichita indicate umukonde konde malemba Bible lichita indicate samuzunze umukonde ngati Solomoni
culture is art.
Welcome back from that short music break. If you're just tuning into Story Club, the show is that of Fashionista, and we're talking about fashion history and how fabrics came to be in the textile industry. It's just a brief recap. Now we're gonna go deep into the ancient times, and we can see that it dates back to 5,000 years ago, where sewing needles date back to 50,000 to 60,000 years around the modern day Siberia, South Africa, Russia, China, Spain, and France. Some of the earliest dyed fibers were found in caves dating back over 30,000 years ago in Georgia. Other textile artifacts like net gauzes, spindle needles, and leaf sticks were found in ancient civilizations in 5,000 years ago, before the Common Era. It's very interesting. I love reading about fashion history because you need to know where we're coming from and to appreciate where we at as a people. People just complain, the textile industry, people are laboring and they're overworking. But of course, I'm not saying that people should overwork, but I'm saying back in the days, people used to sew by hand. They used to sew by the loom, and it was pretty difficult. It was very manual, and those people were very strong. Big ups to them. But as a person, as a fashionista who amazithanda, you should know these things and how and what they are all about. Fabrics and textiles became prevalent in the ancient world, specifically the ancient civilizations in India, Egypt, China, and sub-Saharan Africa, Eurasia, America, and Northeast Africa. These are the places where we see the production of textiles was rampant and was dating back to those times. The Bronze Age saw the rise of clothing and the production of it in India and the ancient Near East. This is around the present day of the Middle East. Europeans used the famous silk and the Silk Road as a trade route that spread the textile knowledge and materials from China to Egypt and then to Rome. And you see, the Iron Age proved to be the effective transition period into the medieval ages. Leather belts, woven wool tunics and skirts, breeches, dresses were a common attire in this era, and leather shoes even protected the feet from outside elements. As we see, these people were voyagers, and there were people who were exploring around the world, and they needed things to protect their feet from difficult elements of the seas and in their times. So fashion history is a very good topic, and it's a very interesting topic to me because I find it very educating. I find it very interesting because I know and I appreciate where I'm at as a person and what I have, because right now you have a suitcase full of clothes that have been moving within seconds, but back then, for you to have as much as those clothes made, you had to be very rich, or you had to be very dedicated to sewing fabric and then sewing it into garments. Guys, big ups to the designers back in the days, because those people are the real OGs. They're the people who made this fashion industry. They made this clothing industry. In the medieval eras, we see that these people were hand making of clothes. That is very, very diligent. That is very, very dedicated, and this is why clothes are very expensive today, because the history just tells it all. There's been a transition in the civilization, and I am proud to say that the fashion industry has evolved and has civilized, and it is one of the biggest civilizations that have happened on Earth. So we're going to talk about the colonial period and in the industrial revolution of these fabrics and what happened then. In the 18th century, clothes were worn either as full dresses to indicate a formal wear or underdress to indicate everyday full wear. Full dresses for both genders were composed of elaborate silks and embroidery. So now we're going deep now like we've moved past that stage where people are weaving by hand and are just wearing basic clothes. Now everybody is wearing elaborate clothes that are made of silks and embroidery. Of course, not everybody, but at least the style has changed. Still we see that men typically wore coats, waistcoats, and breeches, whereas women wore paineers and dresses made from printed chintz and cotton, and most of all, muslins. In the 19th century, the birth of the mechanized and the mass production of textiles was in the industrialization and the water wheels and the steam engines, machines, mechanized fabric production also was there. We see all these things were happening in these eras, and it dates back to these times. This is why I continue to say that it is important to know where we are coming from as a fashion industry, because right now everybody just wants to be a designer, but they do not know that quality is needed. Quality is what has been there, and quality is what we look for as a person, as a people. And today we're just going deep into fashion and talking more about fashion history. And looking at the time, I'm just gonna play a couple songs, and then we'll come back to conclude this program.
Green in the building. K on the track.
We are Story Club FM.
Where my ladies at?
MalawiMusic.com. Nyimbo za Malawi.
Bayuena tola kutimale.
Okay.
Ndio sasa ndisi malele. Ndima kokondo my darling.
Okay.
Onse asanje akale. I got you now.
Okay.
I got you now. So I can do. So I can do. I've been praying for you, searching for you. You're my pride.
Oh God, bounce with it now.
Ngiyakutanda ntombazane wami, ngiyakukhumbula ntombazane wami, nkukutemwa mwanakazi wane, ndimakukonda ine, nakupenda ne. Kukutemane bebezo, ngiyakutanda, ndibonisa kusamalo, nakupenda ne. Kukutemane bebezo, ngiyakutanda, ndibonisa kusamalo.
Bring that fire, where you light up, everything shine like brighter. Bring that light, everything do, everything they say, yeah, brighter. You fire, know that you sling and the way that you move is a biter. You wild, I know that everything you do is an item. Bounce with it, bounce. Everybody rock with it, rock with it. Got the fire, got it. Bring it back, wind it, rewind it. Put the words and recite it. Everybody bounce when they lighting. Got the feeling, I got it. You got the feeling and we vibing.
Good time down, tombazani wami, yakumbula ntombazani wami, nkukutemwa mwanakazi wane, makukonda ine, nakupenda ne. Kukutemane Umpati wami, oh my darling. Zakukonda, oh my darling. Wakongwe wangu, unejingusosa waojo. Wakongwe wangu, unejingusosa waojo. Nakupenda ne kukutemane bebezo Biya gutane Duweza gusamalo Nakupenda ne Wakongwe wangu kutemane bebezo waojo Biya gutane
Stream and download music from www.wow-music.com. Story Club FM. The culture is art.
Yeah.
Story Club FM. The culture is art.
I never thought that I'll find somebody that will make me change my mind. Who would like what I like, yeah, and I would like what you like, God. I wanna stick by, you should stick by me. I wanna stand by you, you should stand by me. So let me love you. Utenga ntima wanga Ntawi zonse ndiga kubona Access granted Baby, you got the password Access granted Baby, you got the password Ndago gonjela ntima wanga nimboni Pesa ntawe nzakuone ndikusimbire chikondi changa ndikuyalile ndeno mwina umvetete tambali wanga wa ukazika cheche ndiwe weka I wanna stick by you should stick by me I wanna stand by you you should stand by me so let me love you Utenga ntima wanga Ntawe zonse ndiga kubona Access granted Baby, you got the password Access granted Baby, you got the password
Story Club FM. The culture is art. MalawiMusic.com. Nyimbo za
Who taught you how to do your thing like that? Who taught you?
Story Club FM. The culture is art.
Tizipanga zinduzo tatipsha ntima. Me wanna love you, wanna kiss you, wanna hold you, father gave me what I needed. Zikuleme na kulandile.
Let me love you. Ndikupate chikondi cha pamwamba. Cha genuine ichi si cha wamba. Zama blanda izindi za chamba. Ndikula katulile ngadi chiwamba. Let me love you. Bwela ndikutubite ngati mavu. Tibale mwana atipate mpavu. Ena adzingo keta dovu. I love you. Siningaike anyone above you. From deep down, believe I do. In the next life, I'll still choose you.
One step at a time. Undipate mkono. This love that I have. Tiga one day.
Let me love you, boo. Let me love you, boo. Let me love you, boo. Let me love you, boo.
Yeah, never tangono, this the end as long as ngono. One step at a time is a puma no. Let the gila ndigu uze bangono. Every day I pray for us, baby, if you don't know. Baby, you're the one I've been looking for. Abandisana mengini za tuzilibo. Ugandita likila tima menya video call. Usegetana ba mene ba janga de win it go. I love you. Sininga ike anyone above you. From deep down, believe I do. In the next life, I'll still choose.